back to the show today. We are talking about bad player development, but also good player development. You can't tell if something's bad unless you compare it to something good, right? Personally, us NBA critics, I think, put too much emphasis on the draft and who teams draft, that we ignore everything that happens to that player between the moment they're drafted and the moment we inevitably call them a steal or a bust. I talk about this all the time, but I also hear people say this all the time. Can you believe this team missed out on that guy in the draft? They chose this guy over that guy? Can you imagine if they drafted that guy? This team has no idea how to draft. Why do they always draft players that are gonna suck in a couple years? I don't think this is fair to the player, especially the younger player. If a guy is drafted at 18 years old, think about how many things can go wrong between that player's first workout and the time his rookie scale contract ends. Even from a biological standpoint, a lot can change. They're literally growing boys. At the time of the combine in 2013, Giannis was listed at 6'8". 3 years later, he was 6'11" and he gained 30 pounds of muscle. Same thing with Anthony Edwards. He's grown 2 inches in his career, and his wingspan has grown around the same too. There's no way a general manager could predict which player is gonna grow more, other than the fact that maybe he was a little bit younger than the other prospects. But drafting a player on the contingency that he might grow a little bit is psychotic. No one would do it. So let's analyze a few players who were nobodies in the draft, but became some big dogs in the NBA by finding themselves in the right place at the right time with the right attitude. The first one being Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol was not a hot prospect in 2007. The Lakers drafted him 48th overall. They didn't even plan on signing him right away. Marc was still playing for Girona over in Spain, and he never signed a contract with the Lakers. Marc was seen as pure potential because there were a lot of rough edges to his game. A lot of what drew teams to Marc was his brother, Pau. Pau was a big-time prospect in 2001, and he won Rookie of the Year in 2002. I think the Lakers were just kind of taking a flyer on Marc in hopes that he'd be half the player his brother is. So I think the first factor in why Marc Gasol was so successful in his career is that he didn't rush into the NBA. Because the year between Gasol being drafted and him signing his first NBA contract, Gasol won the Spanish League MVP. So before Gasol had even played in an NBA game, he was a EuroLeague champion, a Spanish League champion, and an ACB MVP. Imagine if he'd come over to the States immediately after being drafted in the second round, and he had played for the 07-08 Lakers. That team already had 3 rotation centers. He would have not gotten nearly the reps he needed to improve his game. General manager at the time of the Grizzlies, Chris Wallace, believes that if Marc had declared for the 08 draft instead of the 07 draft, he would have gone in the top 10. But of course, Chris Wallace is going to brag about his own foresight, right? But Gasol did prove it because he was on the second team All-Rookie in the NBA as a second-round pick. The next factor that led to Marc Gasol's success was him being traded to the Grizzlies from the Lakers. Remember, the Lakers had Marc's draft rights. So interestingly enough, the Grizzlies had kind of grown tired of Pau Gasol, Marc's brother. He had become sort of a get my stats and go home type of guy, while the Grizzlies were trying to start their antithetical grit and grind era. So the Grizzlies traded away Gasol for Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenden, Aaron McKee, 2 first-round picks, and the draft rights to Marc Gasol. Everyone at the time thought this was a terrible trade. Look it up for yourself. Everyone hated it. Greg Popovich called the trade beyond comprehension, but no one in the league, including the Lakers, was really paying attention to what Marc was doing in Spain. Granted, the Lakers did win that trade. They ended up with Pau Gasol and they immediately won 2 championships. But now Marc was in a position where he could develop his game further. First of all, he was already known and respected in the organization. He had lived and gone to high school in Memphis while Pau was on the team. The team knew his work ethic, they knew what type of guy he was, and that he was willing to sacrifice. Also, after the Pau trade, Marc Gasol got to play on a team that was rebuilding and get 30 minutes a game. Marc Gasol did a conditioning program and a weightlifting program, and he gained 20 pounds of muscle and lost like 30 pounds of fat. Dirk Nowitzki even said he looked like a completely different person from the guy he met in 2002. So playing for the Spanish national team in every international tournament put pressure on Marc Gasol to get good on the offensive end. He was going up against guys like Chris Bosh and Dwight Howard. He had to figure out how to score on these guys. And Gasol set the record for best field goal percentage by a rookie of all time. And by his 8th season in the league, he was Defensive Player of the Year and getting 20 points a game. So if I think I had to sum up the contributing factors to Marc Gasol's success, one would be he was never in a position where he could defer to someone else. He had to be the guy, which not every player responds to. So I think the counterpoint to this sort of trial by fire style of development is the NFL quarterback. It doesn't work for that. I feel like the best quarterbacks of all time are guys who had to sit out a couple seasons first and see how it's done. Aaron Rodgers had to sit behind Brett Favre. Tom Brady had to sit behind Bledsoe. Mahomes had to sit behind Alex Smith. You get the point. I think it's different though for the NBA because you're allowed to get overwhelmed and be a disappointment without getting your clock cleaned 15 to 20 times a week. Failure as a rookie won't have dire consequences on your health or traumatize you for your life. So let's talk about an all-time great NBA player who had a brutal rookie season. That's Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk was drafted 9th in the 1998 draft. Dirk's stock was really high. He'd played in a couple Nike tournaments with Scottie Pippen and Charles Barkley, 2 of the best players in the league at the time, and he tore it up. But when he got into the big leagues, he lost all of his confidence. So much so that he actually considered going back to Germany and playing. Dirk was getting 8 points a game and 3 rebounds a game. He was shooting under 40% from field goal range, along with getting cooked defensively every play. Apparently, Mavericks fans called him Dirk Nowitzki. They took the D out of his name. Very clever. But in the following season, Dirk played all 82 games and he started 81 of them. He averaged 18 points a game, he shot 46% from field goal range and 37% from three-point range. So what changed with Dirk? How was he able to change his game from being terrified of the moment to being an efficient scorer and taking the struggling Mavs to be a 500 team? Well, nothing really. Don Nelson, the head coach and general manager of the Mavs, knew that Dirk had talent. That's why he selected him above Paul Pierce. And that's why he continued to increase his usage even though he had a bad rookie season. Dirk was just shell-shocked during his rookie season, but instead of giving him less time and easing him into the league with bench minutes, Nelson started him and encouraged him to play his brand of basketball and not try to emulate what the players were doing around him. Once Dirk adapted to the speed and physicality of the NBA, he was able to dominate the NBA with his own style, slowing it down, creating his own shot. So now, I hate to do it, but we gotta talk about a player who has not developed well in the NBA. Unfortunately, we're talking about James Wiseman. James Wiseman was the second pick in the 2020 NBA draft. Joe Lacob, owner of the Warriors, thought he was a once-in-a-decade talent. He thought he was going to be the future of the Golden State Warriors after Steph left. He was 7 feet tall, he had a 7'6" wingspan, and he could score. He only played 3 games at Memphis while he was there, but he was averaging 19 points a game. And then Wiseman actually was having a pretty decent rookie season. 11.5 points per game, 6 rebounds a game, in 22 minutes. He was even shooting some threes. He was good enough. It was decent for a rookie. I'm sure the Warriors weren't over the moon, but they were probably satisfied. But then in his rookie season, he tore his meniscus, and he had season-ending surgery. Then the following season, when he was ready to play, he was assigned to the Santa Cruz Warriors, the G League affiliate. And in that league, he hurt his back, and he was ruled out for the remainder of the season. And then tragically, the Warriors won the championship that year, without Wiseman ever seeing the court. Now, I know he's probably happy for his teammates, but dude, that has to suck, right? Not being able to play all season and then seeing your teammates go on without you and accomplish the ultimate goal. And from my analysis, that was the problem with the Golden State Warriors. They moved on without Wiseman. He became an afterthought, because the Warriors proved they didn't really need him to win a championship. The next era of that team were going to be Poole, Wiggins, and Kuminga. They signed all those guys to long-term deals. That trial by fire, high expectations path to the NBA was not an option for Wiseman anymore. The following season, he only played 262 minutes for the Warriors. And while he was on the court, the per 100 net rating for the team dropped 19 points, meaning every 100 possessions that he was on the court, the Warriors were going to get 19 less points than the opposing team. So on February 9th, 2023, Wiseman was traded to the Pistons in a trade that sent Gary Payton 2, the sequel, back to Golden State. That validates my point that the Warriors were trying to stick with what worked. The sequel had been a part of that 2022 championship team. They wanted to recreate that team, and Wiseman was not on that team. So he was sent to Detroit, where careers go to die. So I think there were 2 contributing factors to Wiseman's failure in Golden State. The first one being he was drafted to a good team after a down season. The Warriors had a lot of injuries in the 2019-2020 season. They were so bad that they weren't even invited to the bubble, hence why they got the number 2 pick that year. But most of the time, the number 2 pick in the draft goes to a team that's rebuilding, and the draftee is expected to be an important component of that team. That wasn't the case for Wiseman. The Warriors didn't necessarily even need him. They had a championship quality team already, so there was never really a need to put him on the floor and have him start contributing. And I have to imagine there wasn't any rush to get him back out on the court. The Warriors were so good, they could afford to be a little precious with Wiseman. Almost like an antique car that you really like, but it's not very dependable. So you keep it in the garage that hopefully one day you'll take it out or it'll be worth something. But then you're forced to sell it and buy something more practical like a Honda Civic. Gary Payton, the sequel, is the Honda Civic in this scenario. It's a compliment, I drive a Civic. But I'm rooting for Wiseman. I'm hoping he finds a place where he can thrive. He just signed a 2-year deal with the Indiana Pacers. It's a minimum contract and the second year is a club option, which is the worst contract in the NBA because you're getting the lowest possible amount of money and then you're bound to that amount of money for another year if the team even keeps you. But he is still in the league and he's gonna be on a team that's good. They made the Eastern Conference Finals this year. He has a chance to prove himself on a quality team. I think he actually loves the game of basketball and he wants to have a successful career. So I'm hopeful for James Wiseman. All right, thank you for being here. If you liked the video, like the video. If you didn't like it, you had a problem with it, dislike the video. I think both help. And leave a recommendation. Pretty much all the videos now are recommendations, so I might make a video if you suggest. So be good to your mothers, eat a corn dog.